Welcome back everybody to another video in our App Inventor video tutorial series. So for this video I'm going to go over a new type of sort of block, new type of structure in any programming language, which will be if then else structures, which basically allows us to have control as to how our program is going to execute its code or its blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and do a simple type of mini app with that first. And then towards the midpoint or towards the end of the video, I'm going to go over the lab for this week. So for this program, this mini program I'm going to have us do, it's going to basically use some components. So not everything in this video will be used in this week's lab. Some of this stuff could be used in the lab after. But this program is going to read in 3 numbers, and it's going to output them in sorted order, which will involve doing some if comparisons. And also we're going to verify the input read in if it's a valid sort of number. So we're going to use some type of a checker to make sure that our numbers are within range. Now of course we can set up our sort of app where we have a text box. We can sort of force it to only enter numbers, but somehow, you never know in your program, somehow maybe a letter can be entered somehow. We're supposed to be expecting numbers. So we're going to actually work with that and also have a range of possible numbers. So if it's too large or too small, we'll just sort of not run the program just to sort of test out if statement sort of work. So let's go ahead and start a new project. I'll call this maybe sort. It's a simple sorting program. So alright, so now we have this set up. So I'm going to have once again I'm going to create sort of our text box. I'm going to have 3 text boxes to read in 3 numbers. So I'm going to again select text box and just drop it into our design. And again I'm going to set the I guess the height I'll set as automatic, but the width as always, let's go ahead and fill parent on that. I'll drop another text box in here. I'm going to also, for the width, fill parent, and another text box I'll drop here, and also have the width to be fill parent. Now I'm going to also make it so it's going to have it be numbers only, but as always, that doesn't really guarantee that somehow a number can or a non-number can be entered here. So a letter could magically appear here. You never can be 100% sure about these things. So we want to be able to verify and make sure we don't do anything if a letter is entered, because we can't do anything with this if a letter, a non-digit, is entered. So I'm going to also now have my label, which is going to output the numbers in a sorted order. I'm going to have the label, of course, the height, the width. I'll make it fill parent again. And I guess the height, I could probably, maybe I'll sort of take up some space, or let me see. Maybe I'll go ahead and I'll sort of have it take up maybe a certain percentage of the screen, just so it's a bit organized when we actually display everything. I guess that's a good enough size. I'll keep the fonts the way they are because we're not really doing anything too creative just yet. And I'm going to go ahead and create a button at the very bottom, which would just run on a click button. So I'm also going to have other events I'm going to use in this program besides a button click, but we'll go over that in a moment here. So I'm going to just set this button's width to be fill parent, so it fills up the entire screen. I guess for the height, I'll fill up the rest of the screen with fill parent, so it's going to just fill up the rest like that. And I'm going to go ahead and just have this text, I'll write the word sort. So I'll have the word sort there. And I'll make the font a little bit bigger than it was before. So I think 25, I guess that's good enough. So another thing I'm going to do first is, if you notice, these text boxes and labels and buttons have a generic name. Text box 1, text box 2, and so forth. So another sort of good sort of technique for writing code is you want to have your sort of elements on your sort of your design to have sort of a name that we can actually easily refer back to when we're running our blocks or our code. So I'm going to rename these blocks, or these text boxes. So I'm going to click on text box 1, click on rename. I'm going to call this txt number 1. just so I know that this text box is going to be used. So this way I can very easily identify which text box I'm referring to when I'm running my actual code. You can use text box 2, of course, but I want to give it a better name than just some generic name like that. txt, I'll call this one number 2. And then for a third text box, I'm going to rename this to txt number 3. And also for my label, I want to give it also a valid name. Since I'm going to be referring to this label in my program, I'm going to call this LBL output. Notice how I use LBL, TXT. So it's also a way so I can easily tell. It just sort of, I know it's a text box. So TXT in front, it's just sort of a way to let me sort of, it's easy for me to tell that it's obviously a text box because it has the sort of the TXT at the very beginning. And then for output, we have LBL. I'm going to go ahead and label my button as, I'm going to give it the name BTN sort. So the text shows sort, but the actual name of the button is BTN sort. So we have our first part so far set up. So now we can go ahead and begin writing the blocks and using these if blocks and go ahead and actually sort of modify and sort of be able to sort our numbers, output them in sorted order. Let's go ahead and write the blocks to do that next. So I'm going to go to the blocks portion, and once again I'm going to create a few variables. And well, we have 3 text boxes, so I'm going to create 3 variables. I'm going to have them just maybe declare them as x, y, and z. So once again, we drag the initialize block. I'm going to just Control C, so I'm going to actually right click and duplicate. So it just makes it a little bit easier for me to write this whole thing out. I'll create a variable called x, a variable called y, and a variable called z. Pretty simple. Then the math, I'm going to set the blocks. I'm going to actually duplicate this as well, so I'll have to like redo all this. So I'm just going to create my variables and set them all to the value 0, just like always. So we have our variables declared just like that. So now we're going to have, we have our sort of object here. So BTN sort, so that's my button. I'm going to go ahead and create an event for it. So when you click on this button, it's going to again do some work for us. So I'm going to set the variables x, y, and z with the values from text txt number 1, txt number 2, and txt number 3. So I'm going to get the variable and have the set. I'm going to just right click and duplicate this. I don't have to do this too many times. I want to set x, set y, and set z with some value. So x, I'm going to use text box 1, txt number 1. So I'm going to grab the, let's see, where is it? There it is. There's a txt number 1.text. This will take the value from that text box and store it into the variable x. And the same thing for my other text box. I'm going to go ahead and attach that. And like that. So this sets my 3 variables from the input from the screen. I could do input filtering to make sure that these text boxes are numbers, but we'll worry about that. I guess I'll worry about that later on. But first, just for right now, just set this up the normal way. Just so we'll assume for now the numbers are going to be valid. And now I'm going to have to do some if statements to actually make this work. So I want to know, well, what's the correct order? So we're going to have a series of if statements to actually make this work. Okay, so I'm going to now use, I'm going to select my control block and choose this if block over here. So what's going on with if blocks is that, well, before I go into further details with if blocks, so right now we have these other blocks in our code we've used so far. So for last week's lab, we had these blocks, and all these blocks will run from top to bottom regardless. There's no way that the blocks will not run. So they run all unconditionally. No matter what, each block will run as the program sort of runs these blocks. So an if block is designed to have control, as in we only do certain things if whatever block we assign over here, if we have a true statement. So if something is true, only then are we going to actually run this. So it's not going to run no matter what. Whereas last week's lab in this content here, so far, looking at this code or these blocks, X will be assigned to text box 1, then Y is assigned to text 2, and so forth. So these happen no matter what we do. So if statements are a way to sort of allow us to have control and not have certain lines of code run if we don't want it to. So I'm going to first, well, I'm going to check and see, I'm going to use if statements here to verify which sort of number is the biggest. So I'm going to first compare Y with X. So I'm going to just go to my math and select this block over here. I'm going to click on this symbol. So I want to compare if this number is bigger, so the number on the right is bigger than the number on the left. So I'm going to have my variables. I'm going to take my get block and duplicate this. I'm going to cite Y and cite X over here and drop these in here. So what we're basically doing right now is we're going to say, well, if Y is bigger than X, then we want to go ahead and do some further comparisons. I'm going to first, just for right now, make this kind of simple so we can see what's going on. I'm going to drop this over here. I'm just going to have maybe our output label output something if this is actually true, just to kind of test out how these work. So I'm going to have my output label. I'm going to have a set text. I'm going to select my text block here. I'm just going to simply say that Y is larger than X. Just output that to a label just to sort of test out and see what works over here. So this output will only happen if this statement was true. So if I would have actually just put it in like this in our code, this outputs y is larger than X regardless. It's going to output this automatically. But having sort of an if block, we have an if statement. So if X is less than Y, then we're going to actually output this to the screen. So it's kind of a nice sort of feature with this. Let's go ahead and run this program and see what it does. I'm going to refresh the screen and hopefully emulator is still working. So there it is. So right now, this first number is going to be our X and second number is going to be our Y. So I'm going to go ahead and click and I'll type in 5 for X, and then Y is going to be 10. So obviously here, Y will be bigger than X, so it's going to output to the screen, Y is larger than X. So I'm going to go ahead and click, I'll click sort, and outputs exactly Y is larger than X because, well, this if statement was true. So since it was true, then we actually ran this code right here. Now if I go ahead and modify this and select it where, let's say Y would be 2 this time, and I hit sort, actually the problem was nothing, it didn't clear the label out. So let me see if I can try to refresh this screen. Hang on. So I want to refresh it. Okay, so let's go ahead and now select 5 for my first value, and I'll select 2 for my second. So right here, Y is not going to be bigger than X. If I hit sort, it doesn't output because this statement only outputs only if Y is bigger than X. So that's sort of like really the basics how if statements actually work. So let's go ahead and sort of build off of this and sort of try to do more comparisons and try to figure out which number is the biggest, in the middle, and the smallest among X, Y, and Z. Alright, so I actually just skipped ahead and removed this block over here because we're going to do more work with this sort of code. So I'm going to do a method which is going to be a little bit maybe confusing, but we'll try to sort of understand the logic of how I'm going to do this. So what I'm going to first do, I'm going to just maybe modify this a little bit. So I'm going to just do it in this sort of order. So I want to first figure out which number is the biggest among all three. So if let's say X is bigger than Y and X is bigger than Z, then I know X has to be the biggest number in this list. So I'm going to go ahead and pick another one of these blocks and use this symbol. I'm going to compare. I'm going to go ahead and grab the X variable, put that here, and then grab the Z variable and put that here. I'm going to have to sort of combine these two expressions together. So we have this and block over here. So I'm going to do this and this. So I'm doing right now is the following. So if x is bigger than y and x is bigger than z, then I know for sure that x has to be the biggest number in this list. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and put an else if over here. And maybe I'll have one for right now. So I'm going to try to have each of these sort of else if. So else if really means the following. So if this is not true, so if basically in order for this then to happen, x must be bigger than y and x is bigger than z. If that's the case, then this then is going to happen. And in terms of if else logic, the else happens if this portion here up top is false. So either if x is not bigger than both y and not bigger than z, or let's say x is only bigger than one of these two, then x can't be the biggest number in the list. So we're going to try a different one. So else if is a way that's going to branch off from this. So let me go ahead and actually construct these blocks over here. Maybe then it might make a little bit more sense. So let's go ahead and just try to make some sense of this. So I'm going to have this one where I say y and x, y and z. So this does the following. I'm first trying to check to see if x is bigger than y and x is bigger than z. Then we're going to have this then portion is going to happen. And everything below is going to get skipped over and ignored. Now, if let's say either this is false, where x is not bigger than y, or x is not bigger than z, one of these two is not correct, or both are false, then we're going to jump down here and try this out. So we try this sort of tier method. So you first check this. If this is all true, we'll run the blocks in here. Else, we're going to try this. Else if, try this one over here. Then we'll do one more of these. I'm going to select another else if. I'm going to duplicate this block. And I'm going to have it where I'm going to check for z now. So if z is bigger than x and z is also bigger than y, then z has to be the biggest element. So all we're doing is first checking to see if x is the biggest number in the list, then we're going to do the blocks over here. If this is not the case, we're going to jump over here and check if y is bigger than x and if y is bigger than z. If this is true and this is also true, then we're going to run the blocks over here. If this is false, where either this is false or this is false, or both of these are false, then we're going to run to the else if portion and check if z is bigger than x and z is bigger than y. So far all we're doing is trying to find out which one of these is the biggest number. And if a number x is bigger than both y and z, x must be the biggest. But if y is bigger than x and z, then y is the biggest. And if z is bigger than x and y, then z has to be the biggest. So we're sort of first outlining it just like that. And now we're going to go ahead and write the code inside of these then blocks. All right, so now we're going to add to this. So let's first work out this then block right there. So right now we're going to assume that if we're going to be in this then area, then we know x is the biggest element among z, so x is the biggest. We want to see, well, what's the second biggest element in this list? So I'm going to grab another control block and use an if and else one. So right now I'm going to actually add this over here. I'm going to rip this out for right now just to sort of not really have that right now, and I'm just going to work on this part right now. So I'm going to verify which one is bigger. So right now x is the biggest, so I want to compare y and z. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my math block over here, and I'm going to check. So I'm going to get my two variables. I'm going to get my y variable. I'm going to duplicate this. So y and z. So if y is bigger than z, that means we know the order. That means we know it's going to be the output z, then y, then x, if you output them in sorted order. So I'm going to go ahead and just have my text over here. I'm just going to go ahead and just have it output the following order. So we have Z, Y, and X. So that's going to be the order basically. So X is the largest. So I use these kind of arrow looking symbols. It doesn't really come out too well over here, but I'll go with that though. So Z is the smallest element, then Y is the second element, and X is the third largest element. And we'll go ahead and sort of write that to the label, to our output label over here. So I'm going to have set lbl output.text to this message and just set that. And the else case will happen, well, if this is not true, so if Y is not bigger than Z, then the else sort of block is going to happen. So that implies that actually Z is bigger than Y. So then the order will be a little different. I'm going to right click on this and duplicate. I'm going to have it output actually in this case Y, then Z, and then X. So that's going to be essentially what's going to be inserted over here. So it's a little bit confusing. So let's go ahead and try to make sense of this. I first check to see, so if X is bigger than Y and X is bigger than Z, then I know X has to be the biggest number in the list. Now I want to go ahead and see, well, what's the second biggest and what's the smallest? So if Y is bigger than Z, that means I know that, well, that means Z is the smallest element in this list, Y is that middle element, and X is the largest element. Now, else case for this if, so if let's say Y is not bigger than Z, then the else case will happen, which means that, well, in this case, Y is our smallest element, then Z, and then X. So now we have to do the same exact thing for the other blocks as well. Let's go ahead and continue with this. So I'm going to actually right click and duplicate this because it'll be the same sort of logic, just different variables. So here I'm saying if Y is bigger than X and Y is bigger than Z, then Y is the biggest element. So now I have to compare X and Z because we know Y. So if this right here is true, then we definitely can conclude that Y is our biggest element. So I'm going to now compare X and Z. So I guess I'll keep it Z and I'll put X over here. Like that. So if let's say X is bigger than Z, then we know our output should be actually Z is going to be our smallest element, then X, and then Y. Now, if this is not true, then the else portion happens. So if let's say X greater than Y is, X greater than Z is not true, that means, okay, then X is the smallest element in our list, Z is the middle, and of course Y will be the largest. So we're going to have X, then we're going to output Y, then we output X, Z, and then Y. So I sort of draw these arrows, I guess. So it's supposed to be like a dash and then an arrow, so it's an arrow looking symbol, so it's pointing. So Z goes to X and X goes to Y like that. So I might actually, I should modify this a little bit so it looks a little bit more natural, but I think we'll go with that. That's good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in here. So we're doing some sub comparisons. So right now we're doing the following. So if you look at this code step by step, we're first checking to see if Y is the biggest. So if Y is bigger than X and Y is bigger than Z, then we're going to check, well, between, so we know Y is the biggest element now, so we're going to check between X and Z. If X is larger than Z, that means Z is the smallest element, X is the middle element, and Y is the biggest. Now, for this if, we have an else. This else is going to match with this if right there. So if this is not true, then the else case happens, so we can definitely conclude actually that X is not larger than Z, so we have to output, so X is the smallest element, then Z is the middle element, and Y is the largest. So now let's go ahead and do the last part. So I'm going to right click and duplicate this over here. So I'm going to now do the following. So I'm going to update this. So here we have it where we check to see if Z is bigger than X and if Z is bigger than Y. So if Z is bigger than both, then Z is the biggest element in our list of elements here. So I'm going to go ahead and compare between X and Y. So if Y is bigger than X, then we can definitely conclude that we're going to have X, then y, and then z. And if this is not true, so then else case happens, so this is not true, then we know for sure that means y is going to be smaller than x. So we'll have y, then x, and then at the end z. And we're going to drop this over here. So we sort of have this structure set up where we're sort of trying to find out which is the biggest element among the three. And once we find the biggest element, now we try to find the bigger of the last two. So over here, for example, we first see if x is bigger than both y and z. If it is, then this inner block checks to see, well, we know that x is the biggest, but between y and z, which one is bigger? If y is bigger, that means y is the middle element and z is the smallest element. In this case here we have an else, so else really means that if this is not true, then run the else portion. And in the else portion we already can conclude that y is in fact less than z. So kind of maybe a little bit confusing. So the lab won't be sort of as really weird if LC like this, but this is sort of at least one way of doing it. It's actually a more efficient way than doing it like this, but this is sort of, I think, the simplest way to kind of, how should I say, visualize. So let's go ahead and run this, and I'll try to show you how the blocks are going to sort of correlate with the execution of the program. Okay, so now our emulator is ready to run this. So the first sort of text box will be our x value, this will be our y value, this is going to be our z value, according to how we have our blocks set up. So I'm going to have maybe x will have the value 3, y will be 4, and z will be 5. So clearly y is the biggest, and then, z is the biggest, y is the middle, and x is going to be the smallest. We have to go ahead and sort of use this code to figure this out. Let's go ahead and click on sort and see what it gives us. So definitely the text that x is the smallest, y is the second element, and z is the largest. So it did work correctly. How did this actually do it? Well, let's go ahead and sort of go through and try to trace out our blocks. So we have x, y, and z as 3, 4, and 5. So y, so let's go ahead and run our code. So we first set x, y, and z. Let's trace this out. Then right here we first check. So x has the value 3, y is 4. So 4 less than 3, well, that's going to be false. So that means this entire expression cannot be true. So on a false, it's going to jump to an else if block. So else if is right there, we check. So is y bigger than x? It actually is. And then is y bigger than z as well? Well, y contains 4, z contains 5, so this right here is actually going to be false. So this entire expression here is going to be false. So we have to jump to the next else if. And here we see, okay, well, z contains 5, larger than x, which is 3, is true. And then z, which is 5, larger than y, which is 4, is also true. So this is true, and this is also true. So this entire statement is going to be true, which means now we're going to enter the actual if. Actually, we're going to enter this sort of the then block for this else if. So over here we check. Well, is y bigger than x? Well, y is 4 in this case, x is 3, so actually is true. So we're going to actually set this output label to be x goes to y goes to z. And we're not going to run this set because we only run this else only if this portion right here is false. Let's go ahead and run another example and try to trace out the code for this. So I'm going to have possibly I'll make y 6 this time. Or actually, yeah, I'll make y. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and maybe make y into 1 and x into 3. So let's try that instead. Now we have this output. Let's go ahead and trace this out this time. So x is greater than y is true. And then x greater than z, well, that's actually not going to be true. So this right here is going to be false. So we jump to the else if portion. So else if happens if this is false, we don't run the then portion. We're going to do the else if. So we only do, so if this is true, then we're going to do this. But since this is not true, we're going to jump to the else if block and then check this out. So we see here that, well, y contains 1 greater than x. Well, that's not going to be true because y contains 1 here. X is 3, so this is going to be false. So in order for this whole thing to be true, both this and this has to be both true, but one of these is false. So we're going to jump to the else if again. We check here. Z is bigger than x is true because z contains 5, x contains 3. And z is larger than y is also true because z is 5, y is 1. So we're going to enter this then portion so else if. So if this is true, then we're going to run this code right here. And we check, well, let's first see. Is y bigger than x? Well, y contains 1, x is 3, so this is going to be false. So the then part doesn't happen, actually the else portion happens. So we have an if, an if statement. We have a condition. If the condition is true, then we do the then case. But if it's false, we do the else case instead. So else, in this case, since y was not larger than x, then we know for sure y must be smaller, so we can go ahead and output y, then x, and then z. So of course you can trace this out some more, but the real key to this, we want to break apart. I'm going to break these apart a little bit just so you can see. So the idea is that we have these sub if statements within these large if statements. So we have either this happens, or this happens, or this happens. So if that's true, then the then portion runs. If this is false, we jump over here to just else if and try this. If this is going to be true, then we're going to run this then portion. But if it's not true, then we try the else if again. And we check this condition. So really, we have if, then else. That means if it's true, then we're going to do some work, and the rest of the content is skipped over. So we're not going to run every single line of this code, only on certain situations. So if there's a condition, based on some condition is how we're going to run this. So it's not going to run automatically. So we have these if blocks. So if something is true, then we run that code. Only then do we do it. In the else case happens only if that if condition is false. So over here, we're going to run either this or we're going to run this if this top part is true. So we have to kind of map this out. It's a little bit of a confusing example, but it does really illustrate how if statements work in a very theoretical situation. So now we can go ahead and go over the lab, which is going to be probably not as confusing as this if then block, but it will be using if statements to verify certain values for us or verify certain scenarios. So let's go ahead and go into our lab assignment. Okay, so for this week's lab, what we're going to do is create this game which rolls a dice. We're going to count how many times you roll the dice, and we're going to add a part to a bug. We're going to construct a bug from scratch, and the idea is when I roll a dice on a number, so it's going to compute a number between 1 and 6, and based on what number it rolls on, we're going to add an eye, a head, a body, a wing, or a leg, or a tail to our bug. And once all the parts have been added, then the game is over and you win. And then of course this play again button is going to uncheck itself, and we can enable it and click on play again. So let's go to the notes for a second on this. So here's going to be the logic. So essentially these numbers over here are going to be essentially a dice number. So if the dice comes out to be 1, we're going to add 1. We're going to add a body to this to this bug. If the number is 2, we're going to add a head to this bug. If it's 3, we're going to add a wing to this bug. If it's 4, we add a leg, and so forth. And then we have these numbers here in red, which means that, well, this bug will have only 1 body, only 1 head, 4 wings, 6 legs, 2 eyes, and 1 tail. So what happens is, as we're rolling the dice, we're going to add to each of these. So initially, they're going to all be 0. And as we roll a dice, we add 1 to each of these. And once, let's say, for example, the wing is 4, if we roll 3 again, we're not going to add any more to the wing. We're going to go ahead and tell the user that no, we already have a wing, so try to roll again. So we keep on rolling the dice until eventually we finally have 1 body, 1 head, 4 wings, 6 legs, 2 eyes, and 1 tail. Now, of course, I could make them depend on each other where you can't add an eye before a head has been added already. But just to make things a little bit simpler, I'm not going to actually worry about that. So let's go ahead and sort of trace this out. So when I first run this, I'm going to click roll. And it shows right here that the roll 5 came out. So we added 1 eye to this bug. Let's go ahead and roll again. Dice, we rolled 3 this time, and we're going to add a wing this time. Notice how every time we hit roll, this counter keeps on increasing. So I'll click roll again. We get a 2, so we're going to add a head to the bug. Then I'll roll the dice again, and we roll a 2. But we already have a sort of this head part already added. We already have 1, so we don't really need to add any more. So we tell the user we already added it. We already have a head for this bug, so we have to roll again until we finally get all the parts created. Let's go ahead and roll. I get a 2 again, which is okay. That's not going to help us. We get 3, so it adds 1 to the wing counter. Then we get a 4, so we add 1 to the leg. And notice we've rolled so far 7 times. I'm going to keep on clicking. And we have, we roll dice 6, which adds a tail. And then we roll the dice, we got 5, which will add an eye. So we haven't filled up everything just yet, so we'll keep on rolling. And we have 4, we add another leg. We roll a 4 again, we add another leg. We roll 3, so we add a wing. We roll 5. And we already have 2 eyes, so we don't need to have any more. We have enough eyes at this point, so we don't do any more of that. So we're going to roll again. And okay, adding 1 adds a body to the bug. So okay, so we have that. And then we roll a 3, so we add another wing. We roll 1, but we already have a body, so it's not going to do any good. Roll the 1 again, this doesn't help us. We roll 2, we already have a head. Roll 2 again, keeps rolling 2. Okay, now we have 1, so it's not really progressing. We rolled 6, we already have a tail. We rolled a 4, so we add 1 to the legs. We have to have 2 more legs. Looks like everything else is already pretty much filled up, except we need to have 2 more legs for this game to end. So I'll roll. We already have a body, we already have a head. So it's still, at some point it should finally get a leg to come out. Hoping for that to happen. It's taking a lot of rolls here. Okay, finally rolled a 4. So now we have another leg. So we need to get 1 more before we have to roll to add 1 to the legs counter. So we'll keep rolling other numbers. We're hoping to get a 4 at some point. And we finally clicked 4. We finally got a roll of 4. So it's all filled up. So it took us 55 rolls to finally get this. And all these are filled up. And notice that the roll button is actually disabled because we just won the game. So now we can go ahead. If we want to play again, we click on play again. What a play again button would do is it would just clear out the dice to be 0, the rolls to be 0, and all these will become 0 once again. Let's click on this play again button. So you can see it all cleared out. But play again now is disabled. We can't click on that. We can go ahead and start this game all over again. So that's going to be sort of the program we're going to have to work on. Now obviously it would have been nicer to actually have a nicer UI where maybe we can have different have a picture over here in the middle where when you click on a button roll, it actually adds a part to a picture of a bug. That requires to sort of draw out the pictures and sort of have each sort of individual component as an individual image, and I'm not very artistic, I guess, so I sort of had it where it just has the eyes, head, body, wings, legs, and tail. It has a counter associated with it, just like that. So I'm going to, in this video now, go over how we actually can construct this look and give us an idea for how we can actually sort of construct the logic for all of this. Alright, so I'm going to just actually design this from scratch so you can follow along with me. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. And I'll call this, I guess, Bug Game 2. Now you can call yours Bug Game, but I have mine as Bug Game 2 because this is already called Bug Game. So let's go ahead and click OK to set up our UI. So now we have our main sort of design over here. Let's go ahead and sort of outline this. So of course, at the very top, we had two labels, which had sort of, let me go ahead and see if this still shows over here. I guess it cleared the screen out, unfortunately. Okay, fine. So remember, we had the very top, we had a label for the dice and the rolls. Then we had the inner portion, which had sort of our eyes and a number, a head and number, a body number, and so forth. So very similar to that quarter sort of design. So it's going to be the same exact sort of idea. But in the last video I did for that quarter change one, it's not going to be, I mean, at least that video was not really as sort of well sort of constructed. So this is going to be a better construction. So this is the same type of thing I did in class actually last week. So let's go ahead and first create our sort of the flow of our objects. So I want to first have a horizontal alignment over here so I can have the dice label and the rolls label arranged side by side. So I'm going to go to my layout and select horizontal arrangement, drop that in there. And of course we're going to have to set the width to be again fill parent. And the height, I'll go ahead now maybe set it to some percentage. I'm going to try maybe 10%. Yeah, I think that looks good enough. I'm going to go ahead and just call it. I'll be happy with that. So now the inner portion here is going to have these two-column format, but we're going to have several two-column formats. So I'm going to go ahead and create a vertical arrangement and drop that in here. And of course, once again, set the width to be fill parent. And then the height, I'm going to make it maybe, let's try 50%, see what that gives us. Not bad, but maybe a little larger we can try. So let's try 60. Maybe 70. Let's just keep seeing how this works. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say 70 looks okay. And now I'm going to have those last two buttons at the very bottom. So the last two buttons we had, it was sort of the roll button and then play again button. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of have a horizontal arrangement over here at the bottom. Its height will be, I guess, oh, sorry, I'm going to set the height later. The width will be fill parent. And I want to go ahead and use up the rest of the content below. So I'm going to also have the height be fill parent. So it's going to fill up the rest of the screen. So now we have our general look so far set up. Now we're going to have to, well, go ahead and add some components into this look over here. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is I'll put my two labels up top. So remember, it was for dice and for rolls. So I'm going to go ahead and go to user interface and select a label. And I'm going to drag and drop it in here and get another label. And it's going to drop it, it's going to sort of stack them side by side because we chose the horizontal arrangement right here. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to go ahead and sort of use up half the space, half the width of this for one label and half the other label. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this label. And then for the width, I'll make it 50%. So 50% of the width I want to allocate to this label. And the other label, I'm going to have it also be 50% width as well. Like that. And then we're going to have the height. I'm going to sort of set it to the fill parent. And it sort of fills up the rest of the space. So since label 1 is inside of this horizontal arrangement, that means if I go ahead and do a, what's it called, if I say fill parent for the height, it's going to max out the amount of space over here. So inside of horizontal arrangement, it's going to max out to the horizontal arrangement. And if I go ahead and try the height here to be fill parent, it's going to fill it up to the parent. And horizontal arrangement is a parent of label 2, so it can only go as far as the horizontal arrangement allows it to go. So I'm going to go ahead and assign some text to this. So I'm going to go ahead and call this one dice. Let's say dice 0. And then this is going to be roles 0, as shown in the original sort of app. And of course, well, I want to make this a little bit larger because these look a little bit small. I want to make them bigger so it's it's easier to read this, easier to see it. Let's try 20. 20 is kind of not so big. Let's try 30. Yeah, I think 30 is good. I'm gonna go with 30. So for both these, will be 30. Now, of course, we could center them, left justify them. I think in mine, I sort of centered them, but this is good enough. I'm not going to really overdo this. So we have these two right here. Now, I'm going to write to these two labels. So I want to go ahead and give them a good name so I know how to reference this in my program. So I'm going to go ahead and select this label and click rename and call it LBL dice. And this one, I'm going to click on label 2, rename this to LBL roles. So it's good to have a nice name like that, so it's easy to refer to it when we're going to write the actual blocks and write the actual code for this. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in all these components. Remember, we had in our original app, we had eyes and a counter for the eyes. We had head, counter for the head, and so forth, just like that quarter and nickels and dimes one from last week. So we have to add several horizontal arrangements within this vertical arrangement, just like that last week's sort of app. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a horizontal arrangement and drag and drop it in here. And in the width, I'm going to set this to be, again, the fill parent. And the height, I'll go ahead and I'll make this possibly maybe 8%. Seems okay. I'll try 8 just so it doesn't take up too much space. I could always adjust it later on, but let's go ahead and try that for now. I'm going to drag and drop this over here. This other horizontal arrangement, and the height, I'll make it 8% as well. And the width will be just fill parent. Awesome. So I believe it's actually going to be, so let's see, how many of these do we actually need? Let me just go back to the original app. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need 6 of these. Okay. So let's go ahead and go to, let's add a few more. So, okay, so let's try for height. We'll try 8% again. And the width will be fill parent. We have to have 3 more we have to add here. So let's try again height, so go a little quicker. 8%. I think I'll just do these. I'll add the widths later on just to sort of speed this up a bit. So 8%. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you need 1 more, I think. So there we go. The height will be 8%. I guess I could make this a little bit larger, so I'm going to try maybe 10%. So this is kind of part of UI design. You have to sort of keep on messing around with this until it finally comes out. There's no exact science behind any of this. So I think maybe 10%, oops, not 81, 10% would actually be okay. I hope it's going to work out okay. This might go a little bit too far. Yeah, it does. You know what? Let's try 9%. So yeah, I know this is kind of tedious, but of course you have to mess with this until we can get this to look okay. So okay, I think 9% might be okay. It's not too big and not too small. So 9% actually, yeah, I guess 10 is too big. So I'll go with 9%. This one, the height, I'll make this also 9%. Yeah, good enough. It's not perfect, but of course you could mess with this a little bit more to make it look a little nicer. I mean, one option I could go ahead and click on vertical arrangement and set the height to be maybe 65%, so it's kind of a bit more. Maybe I'll try 67%. So that way, okay, now it kind of fits a little bit nicer. So I'm going to set the widths to all be the fill parent to take up the entire space. All right. So now we have to go ahead and add some sort of labels here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to user interface and click on a label and just sort of drag and drop labels in here like crazy, just to sort of do this really quick like that. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video after this. All right. So, oops, actually not, I put that there. My mistake. I'm going to go ahead and erase it from here. that was not supposed to go there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do one example. I'm going to go ahead and sort of skip into the video. So I want to make it so each label is going to be 50% width and fill the entire parent. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to have the height be fill parent. The width will be 50%. And then for this label, the width will be 50%. And the height will be fill parent. So now you have to do exactly all of this for the rest of these labels right here. So I'm going to skip ahead in the video and just get this all done, but just for yourself, go ahead and just make it so each of these, each label, make sure the height is fill parent and the width is 50%. All right, so now each of these labels has, for the height, it's going to be fill parent and the width is 50%. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of add some text to each label. So going with the image from the original app, the first one's going to be eyes. So I'm going to have the text just output eyes, and the font size I'll make it a little bit larger. Let's try 25. Let's try 30. That's good. So this one will be head. So let's just set 30 for the font size, and the text will just be its head. And then we had body. So I'm going to body over there. And I think I used 30 for the font size. Okay, so it's definitely coming out nice. 30 for the size. And this one's going to be wings, at least according to what I had, but the order is not really important, but I guess I'll just go ahead and keep it consistent with the original app I had earlier. And then over here, we're going to have the font. I'll make it 30. Oops, that's not 30. And then we're going to have the text is going to just be legs. And the last one's going to be tail. So I'm going to set the text over here to be tail. And the font size will be 30. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set these numbers to all be 0. So we're going to have 30 again, 0, and the font size will be 30, 0. Could have skipped the video. I could have skipped this part as well, but you know, I'm already sort of doing this now, so I'm just going to finish this up. So 30, and then we're going to have the text will just be simply 0 for right now, or of course we're going to modify that. But of course I want to just have initial values over here. And then we're going to have font size to be 30, and the text will be 0. So we have this part done. Now obviously having an image would have been nicer. I guess I could use actual images here instead, like in a quarter one. So of course if you want to, you could put images here, and just the same method like we did for the quarter program. Of course you can ask myself or the TAs if you want to do that, of course. But I just sort of made it a little bit simpler because it's sort of a little bit challenging to find images like that online, unless you want to draw them yourself. But I'm not much of an artist, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it like that. So I'm going to have 2 buttons over here, sort of stacked side by side. So we have a button. I'm going to click and drag this, drop it here, and drop that one there. So this button, I believe it was called roll. It's going to be the text associated with it. And this one was, I think, play again. And we're going to have it where, let me see. So again, we're going to have it where the height is going to be fill parent. The width will be 50%. And play again, the height will be fill parent, and the width will be 50%. And I'll set the font to be, let's try 25. Maybe we could try a bigger number, 30. Okay, I think 30 looks okay. And then 30 for this one as well. Maybe that's a little too large, so okay, fine. I'll use 25 here. I'll put it at 25 for this one as well, so they're consistent. And of course, I want to give these labels a name. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of click on this label right there, which is up here. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. This will be LBL eyes. So it makes it a lot easier to sort of tell which label we're going to output to when we're going to actually write the blocks accordingly. It's always good to give it a valid name. Now, label 1 is going to be this right there. We're not going to write anything to this label, so it doesn't really matter what the actual label is called, but since we're going to write to this label, it's good to give it an actual name we can refer to very easily in our blocks. This will be LBL head. This label 6 is going to be, rename it to be LBL body. Then the wings, we're going to rename this to LBL wings. And here we're going to have, let me click on this and see which one is highlight this one right there. Rename this one to LBL legs. And we're going to label this one. So this one over here, I believe I'm going to name this one to be LBL tail. Just like that. So that's basically the app look. I think I made one mistake. I think I'm missing one object. So it's supposed to have this sort of part added portion as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add that into this existing app right over here. I'm going to try to fit this in here if I can somehow. So I'm going to have that label because at the very top we had a label right here which told us which part was added and whether the part was not addable or if it was addable or not. So I'm going to actually, let's see, how do we actually make this work? I'm going to set the, let's see, I'm going to set this arrangement over here, vertical arrangement. Let's see, I'm going to try to, maybe, I think I try to take a label and drop it in here maybe. Okay, perfect. So I just dropped the label right in there. Actually, that was really nice how it worked out that way. So I dropped this label right there. And I'm going to sort of set the width of this to be maximized. So I'm going to set the width for this to be fill parent. And the height, I'll probably keep it like this. Let's see if I make the font a little bigger, what happens. Let's try 20 for a font. Okay, that didn't cause anything to go wrong, so that's good. I'm going to center this. And for right now, I'm going to have this text field just to be just blank. I'm gonna maybe, let's see, what's the default that was in my app? Let's see. Okay, so I had to just say part added. Okay, fine. Let's go ahead and just put that there. Part added. Okay, so we have that. So now we have our UI design. I'm going to go ahead and actually make a label out of this as well, or rename this label because I'm going to write to this label. So I'm going to say LBL part because we're going to actually write to this label in our program. So of course, any label we're going to write to in our program using blocks, we want to give it an actual name. Let's go ahead and see how it actually looks in our emulator. So in emulator, it does look okay, except for the buttons are kind of right here, kind of cut off. So to fix this, of course, we could sort of set this vertical arrangement, the height of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just click over here. So what I could do is go to the vertical arrangement and sort of set the height to a smaller amount, and then have to set all of these heights internally, all of these horizontal arrangements to be smaller like that as well. But I guess you can go ahead and sort of mess around with that. So all you have to do is set the vertical arrangement to be a smaller height amount, and each horizontal arrangement inside would have to be height would have to be less than 9, maybe 8% or so to make this work. So I'm pretty sure on the on a better emulator and probably on your phone as well, it'll come out nicer. But on this emulator, it came out a little bit odd like that. But I guess it's good enough where we can still get an idea of how this actually would look. So it looks okay, but obviously on a better emulator and on your phone, it'll come out nicer. But on this Windows emulator for MIT App Inventor, it came out like this. But we can definitely proceed with this. All right, so now let's go ahead and go to our blocks and sort of make this work. So I'm going to first give you a good starting point for how to set the dice amount, how to update the roles, output the correct part to be added, and I'll sort of give you an idea of how to increment each of these, and then give you an idea of how to sort of finish off this game. So initially, I want this play game button to be disabled. So in the app that I showed you at the very beginning in this video, this was actually disabled. So this will become enabled once again, once the game is won, where all the parts are maximized. When that happens, the roll becomes disabled, and this becomes enabled. When we click on play again, it's going to clear out all of the data, or clear out all of these numbers, and re-enable the roll button. So I'll discuss how that's going to work as well. But for now, let's go ahead and just start off with our preliminaries to this program. So I'm going to just go to my blocks, and I'm going to create a bunch of variables, as always. So I'm going to have at least 6 variables, I believe. It's going to be for each part of the bug. So we're going to have, I guess we'll have head, we'll have eyes, then we're going to have body, then we'll have wings. So it's going to just be sort of a value. It keeps track of how many wings we have so far, how many eyes, and I guess how many heads, how many bodies. But of course, we're not going to have more than one head or body, but we're going to use if statements to make sure we don't have more than the max amount. But we'll worry about that in a second. Then this legs variable is going to keep track of how many legs we have for this bug. And of course, the last will be tail. And as always, you want to initialize all these variables to be 0. So I'm going to click on this math block. I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times. Right click on each of these and duplicate. So I'm going to add zeros to all of these. And I guess I'll duplicate one more time. And I'll keep one out here just in case I have to duplicate some more of these. Okay, so now we have our main variables all defined. So that's perfect. So we can go ahead and proceed. Now we have to have a few more variables. So one of them, well, we're going to have this roll, this dice roll, I'll call it, which is going to be initially 0, I suppose. And then right click, duplicate. We're going to have maybe AMT rolls, just short for amount of rolls. You want to count every time we roll the dice. You want to count how many rolls we actually have performed or sort of have done. So I go ahead and I can actually throw this out. I don't need this anymore. So there's all of our variables defined right there. Perfect. So now what we have to do is, well, we have this button clicks. We have this BTN. Oh, I didn't actually give it a name. Oh, I should probably rename it right now then. Let's call this BTN roll. Now I'm going to go back to my designer. This one should be called BTN play again. So it's good to have actual names like this. When we go to our blocks, we can sort of easily tell what sort of components are going to store or save or retrieve or do some action. So we know, okay, so we have BTN roll. So that's going to be our roll button. I want to have a click event. I'm going to grab this. So when the button is clicked, it's going to do some sort of work for us. So the first thing I want to do, of course, I want to get some random number to assign to our dice roll. So I'm going to go to my variables and then click on set. I want to set the dice roll. I want to set it to some random number. So we have this math block over here. I believe there should be, there it is this. So I want to pick a number between 1 and 6 because we're going to have a standard dice. So 1, 2, 6. This is going to select number between 1 and 6. I'm going to assign that to my variable like that. So our first step is we're going to just simply assign some random number to our variable dice roll. And we're going to have to increment our amount of rolls. So initially it's going to be 0, but we want to add 1 to it. So we're going to take our variable once again. Let's go to our variables. I'm going to set amount of rolls. So this is kind of a really bizarre concept in programming, but I'll go ahead and I'll just sort of go over this with you. So I'm going to take this addition like this. I'm going to grab this and have it just be 1 like that. Okay, so amount of roles contains some values. So it could be 0, it could be anything. But what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 to our amount of roles. So if amount of roles is 0, then amount of roles, which is 0 plus 1, will give us the value of 1. And we're going to reassign. We're going to assign amount of roles to the result of amount of roles plus 1. So for example, if amount of roles contained 5, let's say, well then we're going to take amount of roles, which is 5, plus 1, which will be 6, and we're going to assign 6 to amount of roles. So this is going to basically just keep on adding 1 to this variable every time. So every time we roll a dice, we want to always add 1 to our amount of rolls, so we keep track of how many times we've actually rolled the dice. So awesome. So we have that part so far, so good. Now let's go back to our logic for a second. So if a dice rolls 1, that means we're going to try to add a body to this bug. So let's go to, so if it rolls 1, we want to add 1 to the body variable. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and do that right here. So I'm going to give you sort of the idea for this. Actually, I'll probably give you sort of maybe the blocks just to help you get started on this. So I'm going to have my control if statement. So I want to compare if this dice roll, so this could be between 1 and 6, it could be any number. So I want to know what number it is. So I'm going to have the following sort of math over here. I'm going to do a comparison equals operator. I'm going to check and see if I'm going to take the variable right here. I'm going to get the value of whatever is in dice roll. So right above, right here, we set the dice roll to some number. So I want to see, well, what is this number? So if this number does contain 1, I'll just sort of put it like this. So if the dice roll is equal to 1, that means I want to try to add 1 to the bug's sort of body. But I have to make sure that I'm only going to add 1 to it only if this bug amount or this bug body count is less than 1. So I'm going to have another if statement over here, like this. I'm going to check and see if, I'm going to grab a variable, get global, so body, which tells you how many body, what's a body count basically. I'm going to compare it. I'm going to try this, less than. So if this body count is less than 1, then I'm going to actually add 1 to the body amount. So what I'll do first is I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to add 1 to the global body variable. So I'm going to get my variables here. I'm going to set body to, I'm going to take a math equation, have a plus right there, and go back to variables, get global, get the body variable, which is right there, add 1 to it. I'm going to add 1 because we just had to add 1 sort of body to this bug and reassign it. So we're going to add 1 to it only if this body variable is less than 1. And I'm going to also output to the labels. So let's go ahead, let's say we have the LBL body. So see, this is why it's nice to have it labeled nicely. So we know this label is going to keep track, it's going to output the amount of the body counter will be output to this label. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this and do a set this text to, I'm going to go ahead and get the variable. I'm going to get this body amount. It's going to output this. And I'm actually, maybe I'll do this actually first. I'm going to go ahead and take this LBL part. I'm going to set its text to be, oops, I should have selected the set text block, my mistake. I'm going to look at set text to, I'm going to grab this text right here and say body added. to bug, right? I guess. I'm going to have it output that to the screen. Then I'm going to set this label like that. Now, if this global body is not less than 1, that means we already have 1 stored in this already. So I want to go ahead and have this else case. So I'm going to go ahead and click over here and add an else case. So if this is not true, then I don't want to run this. I want to run the else content, which will simply be just take this LBL part and have it sort of, let's look at the set LBL part text2, and grab a text block and say body already added. So this is going to happen. So if, let's say, little body equals 1, so it's not less than 1, we're going to not do this then portion. We're going to skip to the else part and just simply output to that body label to, well, or that part label, sorry, body already added. If it's less than 1, we're going to add 1 to it. Output that body is added, and we're going to update that body sort of label. This will be part of this if. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this here. Now the rest of the work will be similar. You're going to have to sort of replicate, you're going to have to sort of use this again and again basically, except now you're going to have to do this for, well, what if the dice roll is 2? What if it's 3? What if it's 4? Now you don't have to use else ifs for all this, because really there's no way it can overlap. So the dice roll can only be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. We can go ahead and create several blocks like this, one for each one for each, I guess you can say, part of the sort of debug. I'll put this here for right now and just see if it actually does work. Let's go ahead and run our emulator. Let's see if it does, if it actually works. So, oh, I think I'm missing something. Ah, yes. So I actually want to, so okay, so I made a mistake here. So I have to do one little thing. So I actually did set the amount rolls, but I want to actually output these two variables because right now it doesn't actually output anything here. It just keeps it 0. I want to actually output the dice that was rolled. So right here we assigned some number to our dice roll, but I didn't actually output it right there. And also the rolls amount, I want to also output that over here as well. So I have to add some more stuff here. So I'm going to have my label, so LBL dice. I'm going to have it using the set text. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and sort of copy this and just pick the LBL, let's see, where is it? Rules, there we go. So I'm going to set these to, well, whatever's in dice roll, whatever's in rolls. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a variable, duplicate this. I want to output whatever's stored in dice to that label, whatever's stored in the amount of rolls, take that, output that to that label. So these are going to happen regardless, but then this portion here is going to only happen if these conditions are true. So if the dice roll is 1, then we're going to run all of this. This whole entire portion here is all going to run if this is true. And then all of this is going to run if the global body is less than 1. If it is less than 1, then all of this is going to run. If global body is less than, if it's not less than 1, then this part is going to actually run. So this is actually kind of how coding actually works, except not in block form like this. This is sort of how you want to sort of structure this. So let's go ahead now and see if this actually works. Let me go ahead and actually refresh the screen so we can see a brand new screen here. Takes it about a second to refresh it. Okay. So unfortunately, you can't really see roll in this, but I'm pretty sure on a real emulator, it will look nicer. This is actually, we can't click on this, it's actually disabled. So I'm going to click on this, and, ooh, actually it erased it. So I still want to have it, it says 3 and 1, but maybe it's not, doesn't look too nice yet. So okay, fine, let's go ahead and fix this up one more time. So I'm going to take these apart. So I'm going to actually output the following. So my mistake here. Let's go ahead and take this join and text. I'm going to duplicate this and duplicate this. So this is going to say dice colon space. I'll put that. So output dice, this text, and output the actual value stored in dice roll. That's going to output to that label. And same idea here. I want to have rolls. So this is going to output the text rolls, and the actual value stored in rolls. I'll put that to the label. And now it should be better. Let's try to refresh the screen. And then I can go ahead and then sort of give you an idea of how to disable the button and so forth. So I'll give you sort of an idea on that in a second, but here we go. Let's click on this. And dice gave us the value 3. So dice is not equal to 1, so none of this code is actually going to run. This only runs only if dice equals 1. But you notice that the roll is incremented by 1 regardless. Does look pretty good. So at some point it should, oh, there we go. So now dice equals 1. So I clicked on this, then finally dice roll equaled 1. And then this global dice roll does equal 1. So now this content is going to run. And notice here that the body was 0 initially. So the body less than 1 would be true as well. So we're going to update the body. We're going to add 1 to it. So we take global body, which is 0 plus 1, assign 1 to this. And we go ahead and output body added to bug. And then we assign 1 to that body label. Let's go ahead and sort of see if 1 comes out again. Not getting lucky. Should be 1 sooner or later. Well, this is a very interesting turn of events over here. Let's see. It should be 1 sooner or later. There we go. So now I hit 1 again. So the dice roll was 1. So it entered this if statement because the dice roll did contain 1 right there. And now we see that the body variable contained 1, so it was not less than 1. So the else case ran, and it just simply outputted body already added, and it didn't actually add 1 to anything. So that's how this works. We have to do this sort of work, but using, we want to add more if blocks to this to handle the other cases, because we have other dice amounts which handles different sort of scenarios, and we have to make sure that we don't go beyond the values. So head, we only can have 1 head, we can have up to 4 wings, 6 legs, 2 eyes, and 1 tail. So you have to make sure that these values, we don't go beyond those. So I gave you a little bit of help here, so you can go ahead and sort of go ahead and just add more if statement blocks to handle the other cases and make sure that they output correctly and so forth. So now I'm going to go over, well, a few more things here as to how to actually disable buttons and so forth. All right, so now we have to go over a few more things. So first of all, after we do all of this, after we have all these extra ifs sort of added in here, we're going to have to add another sort of control block and possibly use this and have a lot of ands actually, possibly. So when is this game going to actually be over? Well, it's going to be over, so going back to our board, so if the body variable equals 1, and head equals 1, and wing equals 4, and leg equals 6, and eye equals 2, and tail equals 1, if all those are true, then the game is over. So we're going to have to do a lot of comparisons, and we kind of have to sort of use and to combine them. So if body equals 1, and head equals 1, and eyes equals 2, and so forth, then we know the game has to be over. So we're going to have to sort of add this block at the very end. After we have all that other blocks, added in for each sort of dice roll, we have to add this at the very end. And then we're going to have to disable our button. So what's going to happen now, How do we disable a button? Well, we take the button roll and we're going to set enabled to get the logic over here false, which means it's going to be disabled now. And you want to go ahead and set the play again button. We want to enable this button. So we're going to say set play again button enabled. I'm going to go ahead and right click on this, change this to true. That's going to enable the button now. And of course we have to make a play again on click. We're going to have an event for this. So if this button is clicked, well, then what I'm going to do is the first thing I'll do inside of this, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate these two. The first thing that the play again button will do, it's going to actually set the roll button back to true. It will enable that button, and it's going to disable the play again button. And then we're going to have to set all these labels to be 0. We're going to have to set each label to be 0. And every variable we're going to have to assign them to be 0. So inside of this block, set every variable to 0, set all the labels to all 0, and then set, of course, well, we have to set the button roll back to enabled. The play again is disabled, and just make sure we set all these to 0, dice and rolls to 0. So you have to set those labels to 0 and also set all the variables to 0. So we're going to sort of, once we have the game is over, we're going to have to add several conditions here, several comparisons we're going to have to do and them all together to denote if the game is over. So after we play one roll, then we have to go ahead and have this if statement, but this if statement is disjoint from this one. This one is its own separate if statement. It's not going to be any way related to these ones. So it doesn't matter whether dice roll was 1 or not. This one's going to be its own individual disjoint statement. So that's sort of how this app works. So hopefully you're able to follow along, and that's basically the setup. So I guess you can go ahead and continue from here. So have fun with the blocks, and thanks for watching, and till next time.